It's intriguing how many dramatic plot points in Hollywood stories were scrapped before filming. If you enjoyed reading about Nancy Kulp and Buddy Epson, you might like to read more about them. Their lives had already been filled with enough drama to fill entire novels before the Beverly Hillbillies brought them together. Their later animosity was based on events that transpired before that legendary show. Now, we'll begin with Nancy. You wouldn't call her a normal Hollywood starlet. Harrisburg is the place of her birth. The sole offspring of Robert and Marjorie Culp, Nancy came into this world in Pennsylvania. Her father was a nomadic salesman, and her mother was a teacher who went on to become a principal. At an early age, Nancy uprooted her regimented upbringing and earned a degree in journalism from Miami University. The road that Nancy took wasn't always smooth, but by 1943 she appeared determined to work behind the scenes instead of in front of the camera. She began her career as an interviewer for the Miami Beach Tropics, a community newspaper where she had the opportunity to chat with celebs like Clark Gable and members of royalty like the Duke and Duchess of. Nancy didn't give Windsor a second thought when the call of World War II came. After all, she wasn't exactly a potato back then. She decided to join the U.S. Naval Reserve and dropped out of school. Envision a young woman who served her nation with grit and determination, rising through the ranks to the rank of lieutenant. Turning the page, let's discuss Buddy Epson. Buddy grew up in Orlando, Florida with a passion for dancing. People adored seeing him dance, and he and his sister Vilma were positioned as the staircase's little babies. Life, however, intervened. Even a lunch was out of reach financially for Buddy upon his arrival in New York. It was worth it because he understood he had to work hard. As time went on, Buddy began to land parts in musicals and dance alongside Shirley Temple. His work on Mickey Mouse's animation was particularly sought after by Walt Disney. However, it was not always the case. Once cast as Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, Buddy's career took a major turn for the worse. That position seems ideal, doesn't it? Well, he was on the verge of death from the aluminum dust in the makeup they applied. A stop in The Wizard put him down to whoever was responsible, and in this case, the company manager said that they were responsible because it was Buddy. Besides educating Navy officers and sailing, Buddy had his share of K&X from life, which may have made him a bit of a slacker. Now imagine Nancy and Buddy, two individuals with completely distinct histories, personalities, and drives. Moving to Hollywood in the 1950s, Nancy got married, albeit the marriage didn't survive, and began working in MGM's publicity department. She quickly landed bit parts after a filmmaker noticed her and decided her face belonged on screen. Nancy may not have been a starring lady, but her noon attitude and quick wit stole the show whenever she appeared on screen. While all was going on, Buddy was busy becoming a TV star. Most people thought he was dependable and easy to deal with, and he adored playing lovable, ordinary characters that audiences couldn't get enough of. The fascinating part, though, began in the late 1950s, when Nancy and Buddy began to cross paths. They weren't exactly cooperating just yet in the TV world, but then again, the town wasn't exactly huge. Nancy was well respected for her intelligence, work ethic, and fearlessness as an actress. In contrast, her acquaintance was well known for being staunchly conservative, if not a little bit archaic, and committed to his principles. Both of them were scrounging for jobs before the Beverly Hillbillies. Nancy was a frequent guest star on television series. She was well aware that she didn't resemble the typical Hollywood celebrity, but it didn't deter her. Playing offbeat but memorable parts, she showcased her distinctive approach. But Buddycom was switching back and forth between Western dramas and comedians. On Gunsmoke and Maverick, he played villains with ease. While each had achieved success in Hollywood by the early 1960s, neither had landed the breakout part that would propel them to stardom. When the Beverly Hillbillies came along, that was about to change. Upon its initial release, the Beverly Hillbillies was a glamour and splendor descended upon an unassuming family from the backwoods all of a sudden. The show's charisma, humor, and occasional silliness drew in millions of people each week. With Nancy Kulp and Buddy Epson as its core, everything revolved around them. Mr. Dale is the banker for the Clampett family, and his assistant Jane Hathaway is an accomplished birdwatcher. The casting directors of the Beverly Hillbillies understood they required an exceptional actress to fill this role. Both Buddy and Nancy were well known in their fields, and Buddy was the ideal match. Buddy was an obvious pick to play Jed Clampett because to his easygoing demeanor and talent for playing wise fatherly characters, a man with limited formal education but an abundance of common sense, Jed served as a pillar for his family. Thanks to Buddy's endearing performance, Jed became a sympathetic character whom viewers could rally around. Popularity of the Ozarks family's tale of finding oil and relocating to a mansion in Beverly Hills skyrocketed upon the show's debut. Not only were the Clampetts hilarious, but they were also approachable. Their modest ways contrasted sharply with the extravagant way of life of Nancy Kulp was the one who played Miss Jane in the hilarious Beverly Hills Mishaps. Mrs. Jane wasn't your average secretary. She was astute, devoted, and frequently the calm voice of reason when her boss, Mr. Dale, became excessively greedy. You may have guessed from watching the show that Miss Jane harbored some feelings for Jethro, Jed's nephew, because she felt deeply about the Clampett family. Nancy was nominated for an Emmy for her portrayal as Buddy's mother, which was characterized by an endearing blend of humor and heart. Jed's act was equally well known. In spite of Granny's antics, Ellie Mae's endearing personality, and Jethro's insanity, he managed to keep the family together. Jed maintained his composure through it all. He was the rock in an otherwise chaotic family, and the term, good doggies, became viral in the United States. The problem arises when we consider that the on-screen dynamic between Nancy and Buddy was far from warm and welcoming. The friction between them was not based on their behavior or actions alone. It was based on the internal motivation of the characters of Buddy to want something better. Not only did they have fundamentally different worldviews, but Buddy was also very outspoken about his political conservatism. Nancy, in contrast, is more liberally oriented. Their worldviews were so fundamentally different that it went beyond a simple disagreement of opinion. Picture yourself in Nancy and Buddy's shoes. They had to deal with someone every day who stood for everything they disagreed with. According to other actors they might be interested in, fiery disagreements would sometimes rage on set for weeks. The tone was dead serious, neither lighthearted or lightheartedly flirtatious. Professionalism shone through from both performers despite the strain. For a period, the show's weekly viewership topped millions. Its dominance in television viewing did not fade away soon after it ended. The Clampetts' antics were beloved by everyone, and despite their real-life disagreements, Nancy and Buddy embodied their roles superbly. One of the show's most beloved characters was Nancy's Miss Jane. She was likable despite her lack of showiness. Even though she put in a lot of effort and tried her best, she always seemed to wind herself in someone else's muck. Despite its comedic intent, her crush on Jethro had an endearing quality. Meanwhile, Jed, who belonged to Buddy, was the rock that the Clampetts could rely on in every wild circumstance. Whether he was assisting Granny in producing more moonshine or attempting to decipher the Beverly Hills high society, Jed consistently maintained his composure. Each week, viewers eagerly anticipated the next move from the Clampett family. Nevertheless, Nancy and Buddy's relationship persisted, and some even claim it worsened, despite their achievements. A conflict of personalities occurred, not merely politics. Nancy was fearless and intelligent, while Buddy had charisma but could be obstinate at times. There was an instant electric charge when the two characteristics interacted. Unfortunately, the show's tendency to feature Miss Jane and Jed in close proximity, sharing numerous scenes together, didn't help matters. Although viewers couldn't help but see the annoyance beneath their on-screen laughter and smiles. According to Ellie Mae's actress Donna Douglas, they would have heated debates that lasted weeks due to their divergent views. Just think of how nerve-wracking the set had to have been. However, being pros, they ensured that their differences did not derail the performance. That doesn't imply it was easy. Maintaining mutual respect while working closely with an opponent is no picnic, but they pulled it off, and the spectators never got a glimpse of the underlying tension. By the time the Beverly Hillbillies concluded, it had already become a cultural phenomenon. To this day, its impact is evident in innumerable other series, and discussions about it are commonplace. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, Nancy and Buddy's story wouldn't come to a halt because their differences would affect their interactions. Alternately, Nancy sought election to the United States House of Representatives in 1984. Some people doubted her qualifications because she was 62 years old. Since Ronald Reagan had previously accomplished something meaningful in politics, Nancy believed she could do the same. The 9th Congressional District in Pennsylvania was her race, and she was a Democrat. Her opponent, Bud Schuster, had served 6 terms, and the district was primarily Republican, so the contest was never going to be easy. However, Nancy never shied away from a challenge. Despite being aware of the obstacles, she made a concerted effort to interact with others and express her ideas for change. Her opponent's volunteer to record a radio commercial was Buddy Epson, who was unrelated to both Pennsylvania and the election. He accused Nancy of being overly liberal and of trying to influence voters with her fame in the commercial. A personal feud had sprung out. Not only a disagreement. After years of animosity, this felt like an unprecedented act of betrayal to Nancy. She later remarked that Buddy should have stayed out of it and had no business getting involved, claiming that he isn't the right person to do so. Although she and Jed had a rocky relationship, she insisted in an interview that she would never intentionally hurt Jed, the lovely old man you saw on the show. Her anger was evident, she added. Even after all these years, her pain was still audible in her voice. Rather than helping, the advertisement may have hindered Nancy's campaign. Her opponent received almost 66% of the vote, which was a significant margin of defeat for her. After the fact, Nancy clarified that she didn't hold her friend responsible for her demise, but that the anguish over his actions continued to haunt her. Leaving Pennsylvania, she relocated. After she had some time to reflect on what had transpired, she returned after taking a break to clear her head. But Buddy seemed to have no regrets about his actions. He maintained his position regarding Nancy. However, it appears that even he began to regret his actions as time passed. In his latter days, he expressed regret over the commercial and the way their argument had escalated. The relationship could never have been repaired in its entirety by that point. Following the campaign, Nancy and Buddy hardly spoke to one another, and their brief reconciliation was brief. The act of teaching brought Nancy much solace and allowed her to put her extensive education and life experience to good use. She settled into life as an artist and now teaches at Juniata College, a little liberal arts institution nestled in rural Pennsylvania. Many of the pupils who walked through her doors were moved by her acting workshops. Juniata appeared to be the beginning of a tranquil period in her life, separate from the mayhem of Hollywood and politics. Her kindness and wisdom were much appreciated by the community that Nancy became a part of, not only for her Hollywood stardom, but also for her dedication to assisting others in reaching their full potential. She was later praised by many. Her classes were filled with passion and humor, and her students felt that the stage could accommodate them regardless of their background. As she reminisced about her days on the Beverly Hillbillies and offered wise words to her fans, it's easy to see her radiant smile lighting up the room. Acting was always a part of Nancy's life. She was a regular in community theater and even had TV appearances. Her later work had a profound understanding of the significance of narrative, and her passion of acting was evident even when she began teaching. However, Nancy's life was rich and varied outside her acting career. She was very good at making friends and acquaintances, and she always made the most of her time with her students and their families. When Nancy received her cancer diagnosis in 1990, she encountered a new obstacle. In spite of the news, she was resolute in her commitment to remain a teacher and community activist for the duration necessary. She was known for her strength and courage, according to her friends and colleagues. She was much more than just Miss Jane Hathaway when she passed away in 1991. Refusing to let a single event define her, Nye's narrative was one of perseverance and innovation. Nye's narrative was one of perseverance and innovation. In contrast, Buddy Ebsen went his own way in those last years. Although his output diminished with age, he remained active in the entertainment sector. Buddy continued to appear in films and television series following the end of the Beverly Hillbillies. He remained famous for a long time thanks to his role in the hit detective series Barnaby Jones. But no matter what he did, people would always remember him as Jed Clampetts. It would appear that that persona was unconcerned by the fact that his endearing charisma and memorable phrase had propelled him to stardom. Even though he was cast as Jed on occasion, he cherished the adoration that fans had for him. On the inside, though, it wasn't always easy to picture a profession brimming with responsibilities and skills that would ultimately be recalled with poise and dignity. My calm buddy took on one duty. His tenure on the Beverly Hillbillies was a topic of enthusiastic discussion at many of his appearances and interviews. In a memoir he authored later in life, he discussed his profession, his time in Hollywood, and yes, even their infamous altercation. Buddy was always busy while he wasn't performing. He devoted much of his leisure time to sailing, which he excelled at. Penning novels was another way he was able to express himself creatively. In his private life, Buddy enjoyed a long and happy marriage to Dorothy, who was not his third wife, and devoted his golden years to spending time with his loved ones. He passed dead in 2003 after living an incredible 95 years. He was among the last surviving connections to the golden age of television, as most of his contemporaries had already passed away by that point. So he's with us today to discuss his life together from his room. His passing signified the conclusion of a chapter, yet his impact endured via the numerous encores of the Beverly Hillbillies and the recollections of individuals who had collaborated with him. People with strong opinions who were unable to compromise. Their differences made it difficult for them to get along, despite the fact that they were both passionate, talented, and fiercely opinionated. The fact that Jed and Ms. Jane brought joy and laughter to millions of viewers is evidence of their skill and expertise. But it's also impossible to ignore the enchantment they wrought on TV.